Patek Philippe spent 187 years building a reputation as the watchmaker you could trust more than any other. Then, in about 4 years, it figured out exactly how much that trust was worth and decided to charge for it. And this may be the most self-destructive thing it has ever done. The contract. There's a line Patek Philippe has used in its advertising for decades. You probably know it. You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation. It's elegant. It positions the watch not as a purchase, but as a responsibility, a relationship that transcends money, the kind of brand promise that makes someone feel, when they finally acquire one, that they've joined something rather than simply bought something. That framing matters enormously to this story. Most luxury watch brands sell aspiration. Patek has always sold something rarer, belonging. The watches were proof of membership. But the membership itself, the sense of being chosen, of being seen as the kind of person Patek wanted in its world, that was the real product. The watch was just what they handed you when you crossed the threshold. And for most of Patek's history, this wasn't cynical. It was earned. The movements, the complications, the hand finishing across cases and dials, the calibers that power a Patek perpetual calendar or a minute repeater represent genuine mastery. People who collect seriously across multiple brands will tell you there's a reason the Holy Trinity exists. Patek sits at the top of it because the craftsmanship actually justifies the position. Not claimed mastery, actual mastery. So, you had a real product, a real heritage, and a real emotional proposition. 3 things in alignment. For most of the brand's existence, that alignment meant that the advertising claim, the next generation, the lasting relationship, the watch as custodianship, wasn't just marketing language. It reflected something the brand actually believed about what it was doing. What happens when a brand successfully sells belonging for long enough, though, is that eventually someone calculates exactly how much that belonging is worth to the people who want it. And once you have that number, the temptation to collect it, not just once, but systematically, through every transaction, across the entire collector relationship, becomes almost impossible to resist. This is the story of Patek Philippe over the last decade, not a collapse story. The brand is privately held and discloses no public financials, but analysts at Morgan Stanley and Lux Consult estimated wholesale revenue at roughly 2.5 billion Swiss francs in 2025. Revenue held through every market shift. The wait lists stayed long. The collectors kept showing up. By every conventional measure, Patek did everything right. What changed is the relationship. And the people who noticed that change most clearly were the ones who'd believed in it most completely. The ones who took the advertising literally. The ones who showed up, year after year, at boutique doors across the world, with money in hand and real love for what the brand claimed to be. Those people paid a specific price for that belief. Not in one transaction, but in 4. Before any of those 4 episodes, though, you need to understand the collector Patek was dealing with. Not the casual buyer who sees a watch in a magazine and decides to spend. The Patek devotee is a specific kind of person. They've studied the catalog, they know the reference numbers. They've been in the forums, read the reviews, made considered decisions about which house represents their values and their aesthetic. When they arrive at the boutique door with years of research and decades of saving behind them, they've already decided. They're not shopping. They're completing something. That's the person the system was designed around, and that's the person the system found most useful. To understand how this happened, start at the boutique door. What takes place there has been sitting in plain sight for years. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part, the wish list economy. Walk into a Patek Philippe boutique in any major city and ask about a stainless steel sports watch. A Nautilus. An Aquanaut. Something wearable. The kind of piece Patek built its modern cultural reputation on. You'll be told, with practiced warmth, that there's a waiting list. Patek's preferred internal word for it is a wish list, which is already doing some interesting work. They'll explain it can take years. They'll take your information and tell you they'll be in touch. What they won't tell you is that the wish list is not a queue. There's no ticket number, no fixed position that advances on a clear schedule. No objective moment at which your years of waiting convert to guaranteed access. What you're doing when you put your name down is signaling interest. That's the entry fee. What comes after is where the system gets considerably more complicated. Forum threads on what you seek are useful here because they accumulate over time. You can read a decade of collector experience in a single sitting and watch the same pattern repeat across markets and continents. Someone in 2021 gets told 5 to 6 years in the UK. Someone else walks in the same month, same city, same boutique, and leaves with the watch in under 12 months. Collectors in multiple countries report being told they'd need to establish a local relationship first, meaning purchase something else from the boutique before the conversation about the piece they actually want becomes real. Not because the AD doubted their financial capability, because commitment, in the framework Patek built, means spending money before you spend the money you came to spend. One thread from 2021 captures the experience in a sentence. A collector who couldn't even get onto the wish list without a prior purchase history wrote that he'd rather buy a Lange. "If I had $1 million, I'd not get a classic Patek. They just don't appeal to me," he added. Not a person driven away by price, a person driven away by how the price was extracted. That distinction matters. One collector's account is worth dwelling on. He visited 2 authorized dealers in California. Neither had any inventory at all, nothing in the case, nothing on order, nothing reserved. He flies to Amsterdam, walks into an AD, and finds the exact watch he's been looking for sitting in the showcase. He tells the associate he'll take it. The associate explains that the boutique's policy is Dutch citizens only. So the watch was physically there, buyer present, full retail price available. And the answer was no, because of his passport. That isn't scarcity in any conventional sense. Scarcity means there's nothing to sell. This was inventory being withheld from an able, willing buyer by deliberate choice. The shortage was being administered, maintained, because maintaining it served the system. A review of the Geneva Salon, posted publicly with no diplomatic softening, described it plainly. Unless you're willing to pay a bribe, there's no point entering. You can't buy any steel watch unless you buy several gold watches first. That's the Swiss bribe, which apparently no one talks about. Not a bribe in the legal sense, but functionally a cultivation requirement. The boutique communicates, with varying levels of directness depending on the market and the associate, that serious buyers demonstrate their seriousness through prior purchase history. A gold dress watch, a complications piece that moves quietly. Something from the core catalog that doesn't carry the hype load, but moves margin in a direction the boutique prefers. Once you've done that, the conversation about the steel sports watch becomes possible. Not guaranteed, just possible. The person who bought a $35,000 to $40,000 Calatrava to earn access to a Nautilus made a choice. No one forced them. But that choice was only available because Patek structured access that way. The system extracted purchasing commitments from people whose actual goal was elsewhere, and the system kept working, which is exactly why it didn't change for years. What matters for everything that follows is understanding that this infrastructure, access gated by prior spend, relationship as the currency of allocation, belonging as a product with a variable and unstated price, wasn't peripheral to the brand. It was the mechanism. And when a major retail partner got hold of that mechanism, they knew exactly what to do with it. They scaled it. And what they built made the boutique wishlist look like a minor inconvenience. 170 watches. In 2021, Patek Philippe and Tiffany & Co. were marking 170 years of collaboration. To celebrate, Patek made 170 limited edition Nautilus 5,711 watches. Tiffany's Robin's Egg Blue Dial, both brand names on the face, priced at $52,635. Thierry Stern described the watches to CNBC as "my little gift to say congratulations on buying Tiffany," referring to LVMH's acquisition of the jeweler. 170 pieces. A gift. Warm in the framing. What Tiffany did with those watches wasn't warm. Demand was, predictably, enormous. The 5,711 was already the most desired watch in the world by any secondary market metric that mattered. A limited run with a Tiffany dial, positioned as the swan song for the entire 5,711 line that Patek was simultaneously announcing it would discontinue. That combination created a pressure that every person working in luxury understood immediately. Collectors wanted one desperately. People who'd never seriously thought about watches wanted one. The secondary market hadn't priced them yet, but everyone in the room knew what was coming. Tiffany executives, including America's head Christopher Kilaniotis, grasped the geometry of what they had. Clients would spend almost anything for the chance to acquire one, not to guarantee ownership, just for the chance. So salespeople were instructed, according to multiple sources familiar with the internal strategy as reported by Bloomberg, to guide their best prospects towards spending $2 million to $3 million on other jewelry before the watch conversation became real. Nothing was written down cleanly, but as a practice, it was consistent. Clients were told that relationships mattered, that the boutique valued its best clients, that serious collectors who demonstrated serious commitment would be remembered when allocation decisions were made. One entrepreneur from the tri-state area spent over $2 million believing this. Tiffany staff reportedly asked him to keep the spending threshold confidential because they'd quoted different amounts to different clients. That detail matters. It means this was improvised extraction, not a coherent system with a documented policy. He spent $2 million. He got no watch. Another client spent $5 million on jewelry. Also nothing. He walked away and sold every Patek he'd previously purchased through Tiffany in protest. "I don't shop there anymore," he said. One client sued over a $4 million jewelry purchase tied to a delayed custom necklace, settling out of court. Sources confirmed the purchase was driven by the pursuit of the blue dial. Tiffany eventually broke its own returns policy, allowing some clients to return purchases above $75,000. That's an admission, even if it was never framed as one. And then one of the 170 watches sold at Phillips, New York, for $6.5 million. A watch that retailed at $52,000. The gap between those two numbers is what made everyone who'd spent millions at Tiffany and received nothing feel something beyond ordinary frustration. Tiffany sales staff had a name for the clients who most wanted the blue dial. They called them the watch monsters, the obsessives. The people who'd built genuine, expensive relationships with the boutique across years, who'd written seven-figure checks, who believed that loyalty at this level of spend meant something. Those were the ones who spent $2 or $5 million and came away empty-handed. Because once Tiffany understood what the 170 watches were worth to those specific people, maximum extraction became the logical move. Patek's position in this story deserves honest examination. They'd done business with Tiffany for 170 years. Thierry Stern personally created the blue dial as a gift. He knew with complete certainty what a limited-run, final edition 5,711 would do in 2021's market. He'd watched the 5,711 transform from a retail item to a secondary market phenomenon over the previous 2 years. He understood what those watches were worth to the people who wanted them. The mechanism that Tiffany turned into a seven-figure extraction operation, access controlled by demonstrated spend, relationship as the price of admission, was the same mechanism operating in Patek's broader retail network for years without public objection from Geneva. Maybe the scale surprised them. Maybe Tiffany went further than Patek intended. But the argument that Patek didn't know is hard to make when the underlying dynamics had been visible and discussed publicly in collector communities. For years before this specific event, Patek did eventually close some boutique partnerships. Insiders say the blue dial controversy contributed, alongside what the brand described publicly as global consolidation. That's something. Whether it changed the underlying structure is a different question. Have you ever tried to acquire something through a retail allocation system, Patek or otherwise? What happened? So, the Tiffany situation hit a specific group of collectors hard. What happened in 2022 hit the entire base. Discontinuation and what came after. In January 2021, Thierry Stern announced the discontinuation of the stainless steel Nautilus 5711. His stated reason was clear enough in the telling. He was tired of the entire Patek brand being reduced in public conversation to a single steel sports watch. Patek makes 150 references, many with extraordinary complications, grand complications, perpetual calendars with moon phase and equation of time, minute repeaters thin enough to disappear under a shirt cuff. He wanted collector attention distributed differently. He wanted people choosing Patek because of what Patek is, not because one reference had become a cultural phenomenon beyond his control. The secondary market heard this announcement and did the precise opposite of what he said he wanted. The standard blue dial 5711 had traded quietly around $20,000 to $25,000 for years before the hype cycle started. Retail was around $35,000. After the discontinuation announcement, prices went somewhere nobody had fully anticipated. By mid-2022, Watch Charts data shows standard references changing hands above $140,000, 4 times retail. On a watch that had been available for 15 years without much drama. The olive green dial, released in April 2021 and discontinued less than a year later, is the more extreme case. It peaked above $500,000 at mid-2022 for a watch that retailed in the mid-30,000s. A collector who received one at retail and sold at peak cleared roughly 15 times their investment in under 18 months. A collector who tried to buy one on the secondary market near peak paid over $400,000. That watch now trades around $200,000 per Watch Charts. A lot of people made significant money on the 5711, but the ones who got hurt were the collectors who bought to wear, not to flip, who paid secondary market pricing because they'd spent years on lists and finally found one they could actually acquire, who had no exit strategy because their plan was to keep the watch. Watch Charts puts the standard blue dial references around $113,000 today. If you bought at $140 in 2022 because you'd been waiting years and this was your moment, you're sitting on a 6-figure paper loss on something you bought to enjoy, not a speculator's loss, a collector's loss. Picture that person specifically, not an abstract category. Someone who'd been on a list since 2018 or 2019, who'd had the cultivation conversations, who'd bought something they didn't particularly need to get onto the wish list, who'd finally, in 2022, decided they'd rather pay secondary market pricing than wait indefinitely, and who purchased the watch they'd wanted for 4 years at $130,000. They're wearing it today. They love it. And if they checked the current secondary price this morning, they'd be sitting with something uncomfortable. They didn't just pay for a watch. They paid for the privilege of loving a brand that was making their position progressively more expensive from the moment they first walked through the door. And the replacement? The 5811. White gold only, not steel. A complete materials shift with no steel alternative announced. Priced at roughly $74,000 at launch, already double what the 5711 had retailed for in its final years. Within a year, tariff hikes pushed it to $89,767. The person who'd been on the wish list for the steel watch, who'd done the cultivation purchases, waited through the discontinuation drama, held out for whatever Patek delivered next. Their replacement arrived in a material they may not have wanted, at a price that moved the entire conversation somewhere different. Honestly, I keep coming back to this. I'm not sure whether to believe Thierry Stern didn't see the sequence playing out exactly as it did. He is deeply knowledgeable about his market and his collectors. The discontinuation announcement, the olive green release months later, the Tiffany blue as the final 5711 later that same year. Read in sequence. This looks less like a brand trying to redirect attention and more like a brand that understood precisely how to manufacture market events using scarcity. Each announcement produced a price movement. Each price movement extracted value from the people who'd been most patient and most committed. That may be smart business, but it isn't looking after a watch for the next generation. What 2025 looked like, stripped away whatever remained of the benefit of the doubt, the 22% year. In April 2025, the U.S. administration imposed a 31% tariff on Swiss watch imports. Every major brand in the category faced the same structural cost. All of them raised prices. That's defensible. Tariff costs are real, they land somewhere in the chain, and someone pays them. What Patek did was different in degree from every comparable brand. When the tariff escalated to 39% in September 2025, Patek implemented a 15% price increase in a single announcement. The white gold 5,811, already sitting at roughly $74,000, became $89,767 overnight. Over the full calendar year, Patek's cumulative U.S. price increases were approximately 22%. Rolex finished 2025, up around 7%. Omega and Cartier were each over 10%. Patek moved more aggressively than any of them, and more than the tariff math alone required. In November 2025, the tariff came down from 39% to 15%, following negotiations between the White House and Swiss business representatives. And in February 2026, Patek announced a price reduction. Watch publications covered it with something approaching reverence. Prices cut for the first time in living memory. No luxury watch brand had cut prices in living memory. The Genevan manufacturer was giving back. Collectors who'd been wading through the volatility were told this was their moment. Up 22, down 8. Still sitting approximately 14% above end of 2024 levels after the cut. The 5,811 that cost around $74,000 before any of this started now costs around $81,000 after the historic reduction. Rolex, which raised prices at the start of 2026, instead of cutting anything, got considerably more criticism than Patek received credit for the arithmetic, which tells you something specific about narrative management. The brand that charged you the most, the fastest, over the tariff year, then returned less than half of those increases, was perceived as the most customer-friendly actor in the tier. Because the framing landed better than the math, Patek cuts prices, is a memorable headline. Patek raised prices more than anyone last year, and is still 14% higher than before any of this started. Is accurate, but nobody phrased it that way. The rest of world adjustment tells a more complete picture. Most international markets faced a 4% price increase in February 2026, while Americans received the 8% cut. So the brand's global pricing position improved while generating a localized goodwill story in the one market that had received the most scrutiny. It's a sophisticated piece of pricing architecture. You can admire the precision of it and still do the arithmetic. The American collector who wanted the white gold 5,811 inches early 2024 was looking at roughly $69,000 to $74,000. That same collector in June 2026, after the historic reduction, is looking at around $81,000. The gap, roughly $7,000 to $9,000, isn't a tariff pass-through anymore. That's what remains after the passback. That's what the historic price cut left on the table. The deeper thing the tariff year revealed isn't really about the money. It's about confidence. Patek raised prices 22% in a calendar year and experienced essentially no collector defection. Waitlists didn't shorten. Secondary market demand for core references held significantly better than the broader luxury watch market. The watch chart's overall market index was down roughly 20% from 2022 peaks, but core Patek held considerably better than that. The brand's own market data confirmed that its customers would absorb almost any price move without walking away, which tells Patek something very specific about what the relationship is worth, and about what it can do the next time there's a reason to test that ceiling. So, the brand emerged from 2025 with prices 14% higher than before the crisis. Dealer margins increased by 3 to 4 percentage points as part of the February recalibration. favorable press coverage for the price cut, and a collector base that had demonstrated it would absorb the worst price year in modern memory without meaningful defection. That's not a brand that went through a difficult year. That's a brand that ran an experiment and got the answer it wanted. Honest question. Does the price cut actually change how you feel about the 22% increase? So, 4 separate events, 4 different moments, same group of people absorbing the cost every time. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. What the pattern is? Step back from the individual events, and the structure becomes hard to unsee. The wishlist economy extracts purchase commitments from the collectors who most want to demonstrate their relationship with the brand. The cost falls on the people who believe most deeply in belonging. The Tiffany Blue situation extracts millions from the collectors who most wanted to be close to the brand. $2 million for the chance to be considered. $5 million. Nothing guaranteed, nothing delivered. Cost borne by the true believers. The 5,711 discontinuation and successor. Extracts secondary market premiums from people who couldn't get retail access, then delivers a replacement in the wrong material at double the price. Cost borne by the collectors who'd waited longest. The 22% tariff year charges more aggressively than any comparable brand, returns less than half the increase, frames the return as generosity. Cost borne by the customers who stayed loyal through the volatility when others were walking. In every single one of these episodes, the people who paid the highest price were the ones who believed in the relationship most completely, not the speculator, not the casual buyer who wandered in once. The person who answered every questionnaire, built the AD relationship over years, bought the cultivation pieces, told their friends about the brand, identified with what Patek claimed to represent. Those are the ones who spent $2 million at Tiffany and received nothing. Those are the ones who bought the 5,711 at $140,000, because they'd been waiting in good faith and finally found a way in at a price they could reach. Those are the ones whose replacement watch arrived in white gold at $89,000 when their goal had been a steel watch at retail. There's a specific feeling that comes when you realize your devotion was being monetized. It's not the same as ordinary financial loss. You can lose money on a bad investment without feeling something was taken from you personally. What the Patek trust cycle produces is closer to the feeling you get when a relationship you believed was mutual turns out to have been mostly convenient for one side. The warmth was real on your side, real on their side too, until the revenue opportunity got large enough. None of this is about the watches being bad. A Patek perpetual calendar movement is a genuine achievement. The Caliber 240Q is extraordinary engineering. The independent Stern family ownership has protected the brand from the private equity rationalization that has hollowed out other houses in this tier. The product is real. The craftsmanship is real. You can walk into the Patek Museum in Geneva and spend 4 hours understanding why the brand deserves its position. But a product and a relationship are not the same thing. Patek has been selling both, and both are included in the price. The people who paid specifically for the relationship, who took the advertising literally, who waited patiently, who cultivated boutique access across years, discovered at varying costs which one the brand was actually honoring. Patek will survive all of this. The brand is structurally almost indestructible. No revenue figure or analyst estimate shifts because collectors write frustrated forum posts, or because the Tiffany situation generated a Bloomberg investigation, or because the tariff year arithmetic doesn't reflect well on the stated values. None of that shifts the needle on a brand this entrenched. And this is, in a strange way, the most revealing fact in the whole story. The brand can do all of the things described in this video, and the collector base stays. The waitlists don't empty. The boutique appointments stay booked, which means the relationship is durable in a way that almost nothing else in retail is. Whether that durability is earned by the product, sustained by sunk cost, or protected by the near-religious nature of watch collecting in its most serious form, the effect is the same. Patek knows it can test the relationship and the relationship survives. That knowledge changes how a brand behaves over time. What might shift, slowly and at the margins, is the depth of the belief. The next generation, Advertising works because people want it to be true. They want to be in something lasting. And mostly, they keep wanting that even through everything in this video. The forums fill with frustration and then empty out when the next release generates excitement. The boutique appointments get booked. The wish list keeps growing. But the collector who sold off his entire Patek portfolio after the Tiffany situation didn't sell because the watches got worse. He sold because the relationship turned out to cost more than the advertising described. And he'd spent enough to know the difference between those two things. The advertising line is, "You never actually own a Patek Philippe." What the last 4 years suggest is an edit to that line. You never actually own the relationship either. You merely rent it. At a price, the brand sets and adjusts as it sees fit. And yet the brand keeps drawing people back. That's worth sitting with before we land. The brands that outlast everything aren't the ones that found the ceiling on what their most loyal customers would pay. They're the ones that decided the relationship was worth protecting, even when not protecting it was the more profitable choice in the short term. Patek articulates this better than almost any brand in the world. The advertising says it precisely. The gap between that articulation and what the last 4 years actually showed is the story. So the collectors are still there, still waiting, still hoping the next reference is the one that justifies everything. That's either the deepest kind of loyalty or the most expensive kind of hope. Right now, it's actually hard to tell them apart. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe.